so it's quite an honor.
Of course, Gandhi was the guy who brought India to independence.
Yeah, but wasn't he a sexist?
No, he was a rapist.
So,
Oh,
so every right there's a
Oh,
wrong.
Sergeant. Oh, fuck.
Fair, to
Hey,
be fair,
fuck.
everything is debatable. And
Yeah,
second,
no. See, I'm just saying it because that's what I've
as
heard.
a
I'm just asking.
situation, I don't fully know. I hope not. But back in those days, pretty much a lot was wrong with
Yeah,
a lot of it.
Yeah. Everyone was
Like,
racist.
I'm pretty sure Gandhi's also been accused
bro.
of being racist before. But the biggest issue is, you know, obviously you have to understand that standpoint. But at the same time, it's kind of like that was the thing of the time, you know. For example, to be gay was considered.
Yeah, that was like nasty
Yeah.
in that time.
Like, as much
Still
as you want to
is.
say, for example,
Shut the
people
fuck up.
were racist or anything like that, you got to remember the time period that they were brought in. That was, for example, where it was seen as the standard, the regular. However, of course, that doesn't agree for people like Winston Churchill, who used to call the Indians savages. In fact, he literally once said,
Are you a
"Why would we let
savage?"
the savages control themselves?" He didn't want India to have independence whatsoever. And I find it obviously, that you could argue that that's not racist, but you could also say that by saying that the Indians are savages, that is racist in itself, because the guy he's literally that's clearly something about race. And of course, the British always did kind of see Indians as savages in that time period. In fact, have you ever heard of the Amritsar massacre?
No.
It was a massacre of Indians where, essentially, during the time period that the British ruled India, they banned crowds of gathering of more than I think 5, maybe 6 people.
The corona.
And basically, during in the Amritsar Square, which is a place in India, a lot of Indians for some reason gathered together just to talk, and the British were so unhappy that they slaughtered everyone there. Men, women, and children.
Tiananmen Square moment.
But it would have been worse because, according to the notes after that, it was later learned that the British general who was who was in charge at the time, was actually going to send in tanks. But because the streets were too narrow, the tanks didn't get to the square. But had they they would have opened fire on all those civilians.
Yeah, reminds me of Tiananmen Square.
Wouldn't that just give them a quicker death?
People jumped into wells to get away from the gunfire, and later in the days leading afterwards, you could see bodies in the wells because they died of starvation.
Yikes.
That or
Well,
drowning.
don't pick up
They had
the
lost
bodies
the,
as
they had lost the strength after a few days.
Wait,
And
so they were just lying there for days?
Yeah, no one
Why
was
was
safe.
it?
No one would
Oh.
go there to that place. Because, the British at the time, these were the same guys who would kill Indians for because Indians in the army, they had to. So you know how I don't eat beef, right? Back in the day, some Indians were even pure vegetarians, and some still are. And so the new rifles that they equipped the Indian army with, because the Indian army was
really
so
do so
British, were laced with animal fat. So
Wow.
some people didn't want to chew it off because obviously it could go against their religion. So people who didn't were killed by the British and court-martialed in the army because they were going against what was demanded by the law of the British and the armies of the British. So Indians were killed for following their religion because they just didn't want to touch animal fat because they believed and was sacred.
Makes sense.
And of course, the British, I mean, that was like the height of the empire. The British, when with their empire, were always rather cruel. Like, it didn't matter whatever country you came from, if you were a controlled place and you weren't,
Ska maxa alltså.
you pretty much lost control to the British.
Meh.
And that's why things like the revolution against the the independence was so big, because throughout all this time, the British had literally
the fuck?
abused India. Like,
Vad tror man då?
because when the Queen or as a king came to India, instead of bringing over her crown, they made a new crown assembled of the finest riches of India. They literally took all they could from India in terms of jewels, riches, and whatever. And they, to be fair, they did, like, for example, introduce a rail system, but that was mainly for tanks and whatnot, deployment of British stuff.
Yeah.
And
So they only did beneficial things towards the country to benefit themselves.
yeah, in a way.
Shit.
And one of the biggest things that the British did, which is rather I'm trying to think of, I just lost it. I thought about that.
Vile.
What was it? Oh, right. In the World Wars, there was a higher number of casualties from like places like the Indian Army and stuff, because they used the Indian troops more than they used the British troops. So obviously, use people that they used less as more than they used their own troops. So there were higher casualties of, for example, Muslims, Indians, Hindus, and stuff like that, because they used the Indians a lot more than they used British troops. And lastly, when they left India, finally, they caused the splitting of India into Pakistan and India. And how they did that was hideous. Lord Montgomery, who was the guy who was in charge of it, he literally, like, there were places like, I think it's where is it? There's just on the border of both India and
We're talking about the Burma.
might be. There's a place on the border of India and Pakistan between them. That's just region. I'll search that up in a second. Basically, because of what Lord Montgomery did and how he made,
Jag gillar inte
like,
vår såhär
separation
main tower
between
sitter på
Pakistan,
axlar.
he caused a massacre of many Hindus,
Sorry.
Muslims,
Jag gillar inte såhär vår grabb sitter
because
på
of the way
axlar.
the British did it. And then
Jag
furthermore,
ingenting.
they left the country straight after, leaving all the Indians to like deal with the mess.
Isn't that like war crimes?
Well, it's the British. They can do whatever they like. You know, they took control of the place. Guess it's up to them. But that's why, when you hear about the British Empire and all it did and how successful it was, there were so many casualties and groups like the Indian regiment and stuff like that, as they call them, because, to be fair, the British were the original racists. They were part of this trio of trade where they trade with Africa stuff like
Yeah, the triangle trade.
yeah, they trade stuff with Africa like sugars and sweets and stuff like that, and then Africa would trade with US slaves, their own people. And then sometimes with their own people, sometimes other people were stolen and then introduced as slaves. And
Bro, our
then-
music teacher has already taught us this.
Ah shit.
Pardon?
Our music teacher has already taught us this.
Yeah, 2 times.
No, more than twice. He's like fucking every day. He's like, oh, so the triangle trade.
But did they ever tell you though? See that the only reason that, like for example, even though the US, even though the UK like ended the trade, the US still continued slavery.
Oh my god. Brazil ended slavery in 1888.
No, I'm talking about the US.
Yeah, but still, I talk about Brazil. Great land.
I mean, this is some of the reasons why like British culture and British history is good and bad, because when you leading back to my original point about Gandhi, when it comes to stuff about what education should be taught, education should be taught
So
to
mycket damage.
both sides,
Spaghetti.
not just the good and the positive.
De bara
So,
spinnar.
for example, people like Winston Churchill they should be taught not only was he a
Som när jag var
warlord,
pojken.
but at the same time he was a racist.
Taking fidget spinner.
And
Previous
if Gandhi was a
experience.
racist or a sexist, that should be taught.
Too fucking OP.
They should not teach the white without the black.
Because,
Så lägger man ut en Naruto.
yeah, that's a history lesson.